This is Southampton Town Supervisor Jay Schneiderman calling to order this meeting of the Southampton Town Board on this 9th day of June, 2020. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can sit, but let's do a brief moment of silence, sitting as we're about to enter phase 2. Things are starting to open up a little bit, and that's great. But I don't want us to forget what we've been through, and we're still going through. So over 100,000 American lives lost and over 400,000 globally to this pandemic. I suppose it could have been worse if we hadn't taken all the steps we've taken, but that doesn't undo the tremendous toll that this pandemic has had on the nation and nations around the world. So why don't we pause, remembering that we're not done with this yet. There will be more deaths, unfortunately, that will come as a result of this before we have a vaccine. But let's pause in memory of all the lives lost, including one of our own town employees who fell to this pandemic. So let's pause in silence in their memory. All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman.
Present.
Councilwoman Lofstad.
Here.
Councilman Martell.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present.
All right, so we're all here. Before I ask Ryan to do a walk-on, Ryan to do an update, and I will do the walk-ons following Ryan. We'll get those on to be part of our agenda. I wanted to just say that, again, I find these Zoom meetings to be challenging, and I'm a firm believer in participatory representative democracy, and I find it, I think, challenging for the public to be a part of our deliberations. So I am working with Frank, my deputy supervisor, in having the next town board meeting actually occur at the town board meeting room. With social distancing, I believe we can get the board there, and attorneys and clerk staff and others. The public will probably be limited to 12 seats, but we're working on arrangements that if more people want to come in person, they'll be able to do that, or maybe communicate by phone. But we're working on ways that people can queue, maybe even stay in their car outside and listen to the meeting, and we'll text them when it's their opportunity to speak. So I very much would like to get back to some semblance of normalcy, and I just asked the board's indulgence. It's not going to be perfect, but if we could meet, not for our work session, but the next full town board meeting, which is toward the end of June. Sunday, what is that, the 23rd or 4th? Or
23rd.
On the 23rd of June, to try to meet at town hall, and people can reserve seats. I guess we'll figure that out. Through contacting the office, and if we have open seats, we'll be able to bring people in without appointments, and if we fill up and somebody still wants to speak in person, we're going to try to make it so that they can do that. All right, let me throw it to Ryan. Ryan is our Director of Public Safety, and he has been coordinating our pandemic response, and he's been a very busy person for about 3 months now. But we are starting to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel here. So, Ryan?
Sure. Thanks, Supervisor. Thank you, everyone. As of tomorrow, we'll be entering phase 2 for our region, for which is Long Island, which is obviously a combination of both Nassau and Suffolk. We're grouped together as the region. Some of the changes that people can begin to expect to see in phase 2, professional offices will be reopening. Real estate transactions and business is allowed to begin to re-engage at this point for phase 2. In-store retail. So prior to this, we've had curbside pickup available in phase 1. Curbside pickup only changed to that you can go in store to go and pick things up. And now we're going to where shoppers can actually go into retail establishments in phase 2 and conduct shopping. Vehicle sales and rentals and leasing is allowed to occur again in phase 2. Commercial building management, salon and barber shops are allowed to open in phase 2. I see some excited faces.
Yay!
And outdoor. So all in all, phase 2 is going to be the closest thing to normal that we've seen in a long time. The fact that people will, as you go about your day-to-day business, you'll be able to see people going in and out of stores to do shopping in retail establishments, especially our, downtown shops, as opposed to just, bigger box stores being allowed to be open prior to this point. It'll be nice to see some vitality return to our downtown business districts. You'll be able to see people dining outside at some of our restaurant establishments. And people will begin to look more as maybe you remembered them prior to salons and barbershops being closed. So for the general public, this is going to be the closest thing that we've seen in a long time to a normal appearance of society. Obviously, there are still going to be some changes. Masks are still going to be required. Gatherings of non-essential people are still limited at this point. We're hoping to see those numbers perhaps go up a little bit. As of right now, it's still non-essential gatherings are limited to 10 people or less. And even in these establishments, the retail shops and restaurants and things like that, no in building dining at restaurants, outdoor dining only. And our fire marshal's office and land management building department have been working diligently with the restaurants and have been collaborating together very well to create a mechanism by which restaurants will be able to potentially expand their outdoor footprint a little bit to allow them to have some more seating as a temporary relief measure, so that hopefully they can achieve something closer towards what they would normally do in business without having the access to their interior spaces. But even in those places, you're going to see people wearing masks. When you're not seated at a table and dining, you'll have to have a mask on. The wait staff that's coming in and serving you and helping you are going to have masks on. In retail establishments, you're going to need to have a mask. The employees will have masks. So it's not back to normal, and we don't necessarily want to rush that and run it back to normal too quickly by getting rid of some of the safety precautions. We don't need to see any kind of spikes in confirmed positives. We ask people to still be very mindful of that. Any holdups along the way just prevent us from getting to the end. And so we need people to follow the restrictions, as much as they might be annoying or painful or might seem like they're not necessary anymore. They are. We've heard from Southampton Hospital recently that, they're resuming elective surgery, but 72 hours before surgery, you have to be tested for COVID. And they, out of 3 people that were coming in for elective surgery, they indicated, 2 of them were completely asymptomatic, but tested positive for COVID. So it's still out there. We still want to make sure that we stave off the transmission of this, of COVID-19 from spreading throughout the community. And we need everybody's help in doing so that we can continue to progress through these phases successfully and as quickly as possible to get ourselves to phase 4 and really back towards more of a normal, obviously with a sense of what we've all been through and maybe adjusting our behaviors a bit, but close to normal. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I don't know if anybody has any more specific questions about any of the goings on.
Ryan, the guidance you got on outdoor botanical gardens and sculpture gardens, can you share that?
Sure. We, as of, I believe it was mid last week or Wednesday or Thursday of last week, Supervisor, I think we we communicated directly with New York State ESD, Empire State Development, who is issuing all the guidance for the activities, and asked their permission and interpretation on outdoor botanical gardens and sculpture gardens on the basis that we felt that they were basically parks for all intents and purposes. The indoor spaces at those facilities are still not allowed to be open, but we did secure a determination that the outdoor spaces can be opened with proper social distancing and sanitary conditions maintained. So all of any outdoor botanical gardens or sculpture gardens within the town of Southampton are allowed to be open at this point in time. Really, they're allowed to be open anywhere that they happen to exist. So East Hampton as well. But we're, any of the other towns, I don't know if they were, paying attention to that too much. We went out and asked on it to make sure.
Ryan, real quick, also on outdoor dining, which starts tomorrow. Obviously, those restaurants that have permits for outdoor dining can just resume the outdoor dining, but those without it, or those who want to expand into areas where they haven't already had outdoor dining, just very quick, can you just explain the process and what you're doing to help them?
Yeah, sure. So it's a very simple application. It's available on the website. So the fire marshal's office reached out to most of our assembly spaces. Our restaurants fall into that category probably 2.5 weeks ago to begin the dialogue on this, even ahead of any distinct guidance being issued by the state. We told people certain things that they could or should think about to be ready for reopening, to develop a temporary plan for how they might reopen with reduced occupancies, sanitary conditions maintained, and things like that, so that when the state finally came out with what had to be done, our folks would already be in the right mindset and wouldn't have to do much to develop the rest of their plan. Thankfully, many of our restaurants actually had already taken some of those actions. And so when the state came out with the guidance on exactly what would be necessary for this to occur, our folks, many of them were ready to go. Anybody with outdoor dining obviously can re-engage in the outdoor dining process immediately tomorrow. Anyone that wishes to expand the footprint of their outdoor dining area, they have additional property they own as part of their facility. They have parking lot areas that they may wish to partially utilize. There's an application process by which they can communicate with the fire marshal's office and make arrangements to potentially expand their footprint. Obviously, we don't want that to block any kind of emergency egress routes. We don't want any negative safety implications of any of the actions that they take. So it'll be reviewed. It's about a 1.5 to 2-page application. It's very short, very quick, very easy. Site plan, a couple of things written down, most check boxes indicating that you comply with a bunch of different things, and that's the end of it. It's not designed to be onerous for them to have to fill this out. Anybody that doesn't currently have outdoor dining and wishes to utilize some space for outdoor dining during this time period, same application. Fill it out, get into the fire marshal's office. They're working very quickly to communicate with the applicants that they can go ahead with what they're looking to do, so that they can begin the process immediately. It's designed to be fast and easy so that we can get everybody going and help them out as much as possible.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Any questions from the board members to Ryan?
Yeah, just if they want that application, it's on the website and they're working directly through fire marshal.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, and the interim parking restrictions on road ends remains in effect. That's been extended. So people need to be aware of that. And we have open now 6 of the beaches. So that's important too. Ponquag and Tiana and Pikes and Flying Point and Sagmain and Long Beach. I think those are the 6. So so they're open, and we're going to continue to open beaches. So any other questions? All right, thank you, Ryan, for that update. All right, so let's then try to add a few resolutions to our agenda. You guys should have been given a walk-on packet. There's 6 walk-ons being proposed. The first one is sponsored by Rick. It's 34197. It awards and authorizes the supervisor to sign a contract with Southern Rehabilitation for a 1,000,000-gallon elevated water storage tank. I didn't know that was going to be walk-on. I might ask that we take that one separately because I had some questions about that. 34202 is sponsored by Councilman Scavone, amends contract with Contemporary Computer Services, Inc. to upgrade Microsoft Active Duty Directory services. 34204, also Councilman Scavone, authorized the supervisor to execute a 2021 contract extension with Seneca Pavement Markings, Inc. to furnish and install pavement markings on various town roads. 34205, authorize the supervisor to execute a contract extension with Contemporary Computer Services for managed network services. 34209 is the warrant. Number 11, 34210, authorization for the implementation of the reopening plan for the town of Southampton. So before we vote on walking these on, I actually had some questions about the lowest bidder on that elevated water storage tank that I had preferred to discuss in exec session. So if that can wait, Rick, is there an urgency to that? Do you know?
No, I think we can wait another couple weeks.
Okay, that's for the repainting of the tank.
Right. We want to get it moving, but we can wait another couple weeks.
All right, so can you withdraw that as a walk-on rather than having to vote against it?
Yes, I'll withdraw that.
All right, thank you, and we'll put that on for exec session. So then I'll make a motion to walk number 2 through 6 on. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Lofstad, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so those will be part of our agenda with the exception of the 34197. Okay, we'll take those up at the end. All right, so next, let me make a motion to approve the minutes from our May 26th meeting of 2020. Do I have a second? Second by Councilman Bouvier, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, let's go to communications. I'll ask our clerk, Cindy Schermeyer, to read the communications.
Following communications have been received in my office of town clerk. We have received public notices from the town of Riverhead, a public hearing notice. Village of West Hampton Beach filed their 5th emergency order dated May 15th. New York State license 30-day advance notice for a new applicant in Southampton. Town Fire Districts, the Hampton Bays Fire District, an emergency declaration extension through June 30th, 2020. Financial disclosure statements were filed by the listed individuals, and the following bid openings took place. On May 28th for the mobile food concession at Mecox Beach, mobile ice cream concession at W. Scott Cameron Beach, and used wheel loader. And the following reports were filed. The town comptroller's May 2020 monthly financial reports and WSP status report groundwater remedial action Row Industries Superfund site in Sag Harbor for the January, February, and March 2020 reports. And that concludes the communications for this meeting's agenda.
All right, thank you, Cindy. All right, so before we go to public hearings, Cindy, did you get any communications of any individuals asking to be heard specifically at public hearings?
I did not receive any.
Okay, and we'll have to find out from Charles if there's anybody looking to speak at any of these hearings. So why don't we start with the first public hearing, and I'll ask you, Cindy, if you could read the notice.
Certainly. Public hearing number 1 on the acquisition of lands of Schmidt, Bridgehampton, and amend the CPF management and stewardship plan to include property.
All right, let me ask our CPF manager, Lisa Combrink, to introduce this.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board and council. The first public hearing on for today involves property at 626 Millstone Road in Bridgehampton. Tara Cody from IT is going to be assisting me today with the aerials. On this particular property is located at 936-1-37. It's shown now on your screens, on the screen sharing capability. The property is included in the CPF project plan as part of the Eastern GIS target area. It's 3.9 acres, just a little shy of 4 acres. It's vacant, and it includes an easement right-of-way for access from the property that directly abuts Millstone Road. This is zoned CR 80. It is adjacent, you can see in the area designated as green, an area that is 25 acres that is restricted by Suffolk County development rights. So that's in agriculture. So this property would be purchased for open space purposes, but it would add on to some existing restricted or preserved lands. The purchase price on this particular parcel is $1 million. I wanted to also mention that we are looking to acquire, and we have been in negotiations to acquire the parcel that is on your screen. It's immediately to the left of the subject piece. It's the the rectangular shaped parcel that's owned by another individual or another family.
All right, so yeah, my first question, Lisa, would it make sense for us to acquire this if we didn't have the other one?
Well, I think it is listed on our CPF project plan as a target property because it's contained in the Eastern GIS target area. It is adjacent to the restricted Suffolk County preserved farmland. So I think in keeping with our, I think the approach that we like to use is we like to add on to properties that either the town holds or that other municipalities or not-for-profits hold and are preserving. So it would definitely add to the existing piece to the south, whatever direction, down below that.
Now, is that the power lines that run through there? Is that what I'm seeing that in that cut? Or is that a road?
I'm not sure about that. I don't think that there's a power line going through that.
It's just a driveway, maybe?
Maybe a driveway. Because if you look at the parcel to the right, that's directly on Millstone.
Yeah, there's other properties that take access off of it.
That comes in, right?
Can you zoom out again? Are there other properties that take access through this piece?
No, this property that we're looking at is getting access from the piece, the smaller piece that has the house on it. That's to the right of it. There's a recorded right of way, so it isn't where you see that existing driveway. It's going to be over a little bit. And that's been provided to me by the attorney for the owner.
And how big is this parcel again?
It's just shy of 4 acres. It's 3.9 acres. Zone CR 80.
But it can only have one house on it, right?
That's correct. It's one house.
Board, any board members have questions for Lisa?
Yeah, what is the green property to the south? I think you said it was something, but
it's an agricultural use. Suffolk County has purchased the development rights on the entire 25 acres of that piece. So it's always restricted. It will always have to be used for agriculture.
so it looks like it might be a tree farm or something. It looks on the north end there, all those little dark things. Yeah.
It looks like a landscaping use, and then I believe the area below that is probably row crops of some kind.
Okay.
And more landscape material on Loper's Path. So that property will never be developed for anything else no houses or anything else.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's go to the public. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard at this public hearing? Only this public hearing on this piece of property. Charles, do you know?
Hard for me to see when you're sharing.
Well, maybe we can unmute everybody, and if
Not everyone. They can unmute themselves.
they can unmute themselves. So if you wish to be heard at this public hearing, unmute yourself and say something.
Hello, I'm Tiffany Gavin. Can you hear me?
I
Yeah.
can hear you, Tiffany.
I think there's other residents also. Can I speak on the matter that we had originally met on May 12th Zoom meeting? Are we at that point in the meeting?
No. We're simply talking about the acquisition of a piece on Loper's Path, I think it's called.
One day I'll get this right. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Okay, maybe it's not on Loper's Path. The other preserved piece is
It's on Millstone Road.
on Millstone Road. Okay. All right. So it doesn't sound like there's anybody who wishes to be heard. So I will make a motion to close, but we'll leave the record open for written comments for 2 weeks. All right.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So that is closed for oral testimony and open for written testimony for 2 weeks. You got that, Sandy? Okay, excellent. Sandy, would you read the next public hearing notice? You're muted. Sandy, you're still muted. There you go.
Unmuted. Okay, thank you. Public hearing number 2 on the acquisition of lands of Ruby Associates LLC, Hampton Bays, and amend the CPF Management Stewardship Plan to include the property.
All right, and we'll go back, I think, to our CPF coordinator, Lisa Combrick, to present this.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The property is located at 21 West Tiana Road in Hampton Bays, Suffolk County Tax Map number 900, 255, 1, 32.4. You're seeing on your screen sharing an aerial showing the subject property. It's located on Hidden Cove. It's a 1.4 acre parcel. Hidden Cove that it abuts goes out to Tiana Bay, as I'm sure many of you know. We have begun acquiring over the last several years several properties in this area. You can see some of them in green. We own, there are a few parcels over, but we've been in the process of demolishing cottages that front onto the creek and the bay. And so this would be a nice acquisition close by. You can see from the aerial that there was a foundation constructed on this property. The owner had intended some time ago to build a house. However, he decided not to go forward with that. He has obtained a demolition permit. That's one of the requirements of this acquisition if it's approved. So he obtained a demolition permit at the beginning of March of this year to demolish the foundation at his expense prior to the town acquiring the property. This is also in a critical environmental area for town freshwater wetlands, also for DEC freshwater and tidal wetlands.
What's the price here, Lisa?
The price is $722,000.
And it's obviously a buildable lot since they have a foundation there. Was there any restrictions or I don't know, anything that would make it difficult to build there?
Well, the owner did obtain a building permit for a single family dwelling. I'm sure there were restrictions in terms of wetland setbacks because of its location on the creek. As I mentioned, though, the owner decided not to move forward with the construction. So we talked about the possibility of the town demolishing it, but the owner agreed to take that on and complete that himself if the acquisition is approved.
And what's the zoning?
The zoning is R40, so this it's been attributed at 1 development credit.
How big is it again?
1 credit.
No, how many acres is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, 1.48 acres. So it's a little over one. It's almost an acre and a half.
It's got a lot of linear feet of waterfront.
Yes, it does. It's a flag lot. And then, yeah, a large area that's along the creek. Or Hidden Cove, as it's called. I'm sorry, not a creek, Hidden Cove.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, on the shoreline of the cove, are we going to revert that back to more of a natural coastline with some more upland vegetation, at least, you know, let it revert back to its natural state? I see it's kind of open there.
Right, yes, we would let it revert back, and I believe the owner was working with the environmental division on some restoration plan, which I can check the status of that, but definitely would revert back, and that would be a benefit to the water quality in the area, and continue with our efforts to preserve property along in this area.
Would we fence this? I noticed that there's a neighboring property that this is between that house and the water. And, you know, with everything ripped out, it's probably going to feel like the front lawn to that large estate-like property.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to spend $700,000 on giving somebody a waterfront front lawn. So are we going to, is this going to be a park? I mean, what's the plan here? Is it going to be public access? Are we going to fence off the land?
We haven't made any specific plans in terms of fencing, but as you know, sometimes we do install fencing to prevent encroachments if that's an issue. And this is the estate property that you're referring to is a separate owner, not related to this property at all. So, you know, we'd have to assess that, but I mean, we were preserving it really for open space purposes only. We did not have any plans at this point to create any type of public access.
The other property is a big beneficiary potentially of this being acquired. But no, not necessarily if we let it revert to its natural state and the view gets blocked instead by a house, instead of a house, but by trees. Mm-hmm. So, but it would, you know, the intention is not necessarily as some kind of passive park, waterfront.
No, it would just be open space to revert back to help really with wetlands generation on the site.
There's no boat launch ramps or anything like that, or access. Is there a little dock on this? Looks like a little pier on it.
I can tell you that at low tide, there's not a lot of water there. I used to live on that last little cottage up there. And when it's low tide, there's no water there. I don't know whether they have had it dredged since I lived there, but I don't think a boat can make it up. Maybe a kayak.
Okay, looks like a little pier that juts out on the very bottom.
I'll check on that.
Maybe it's just some sort of walkway. I see it looks like other properties don't have docks for boats. Maybe it's for rowboats, I don't know. Are any other questions?
As you get closer to the bay, it gets deeper, but up toward the back here, there's not a lot of water.
Okay. Other questions? All right, let's try to go to the public. Again, this is really only for comment on this acquisition of this property on Tiana Bay and Hampton Bays. This is off of West Tiana, I think, right?
Yeah.
So is there anyone who is part of this Zoom video conference that wants to be heard on this public hearing, please unmute your line and identify yourself.
I see none.
Okay, I'll make a motion like before to close the public hearing except for written comments, which would be accepted for the next 2 weeks. Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's all 5. All right, Sunday, would you read the next one?
Public hearing number 3 on the acquisition of lands of Zipper, Tuckahoe, and amend the CPF management and stewardship plan to include property.
All right, and once again, I'll turn to Lisa Combrink, our CPF manager, to introduce us.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. This property is located on Broidy Lane in the Tuckahoe area. You can see it outlined in yellow on the aerial. It's identified as Suffolk County Tax Map number 900-129-236.10. This property is vacant. It's 2.2 acres in the CR 80 zoning district. This property is included in our CPF project plan in the Tuckahoe Woods target area. And as you can see from the aerial, it is adjacent to several preserved properties. The one that's above it is a 16-acre piece. And then you can see, I believe it's to the south, there's another Southampton town parcel, and there's a big Suffolk County DPW piece. Looks to be to the west. This particular property contains wetlands, so development would be restricted, although I believe a single family home could still be constructed on the property. This was part of a 1982 subdivision called Southampton Country Club East. And the purchase price for this parcel is $500,000.
You said it is developable?
Yes.
All right. And the large piece between, just to the left of it, is that something that we're looking at as well, or?
We have not looked at that yet. It's privately owned. It appears to have some landscaping uses, and I think there's also at least one house on it. That's about 13 acres, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
We could do an outreach on that parcel also. That would be nice, kind of add to our existing holdings in that area.
Okay, so board, do you have any questions for our CPF manager? All right, let's go to the public. So once again, this is to solicit comment on a potential acquisition property of Zipper in Tuckahoe. It's a 2.2 acre property. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this matter, and this matter only? Okay, I'll make the same motion to close the public hearing and leave the record open for 2 weeks for written comment. Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Sunday, that is closed except for the written record. And Sunday, if you move on to the 4th public hearing notice.
Public hearing number 4, chapter 140 on the acquisition of lands of DePiro and Dedrick, West Hampton, and amend the CPF management and stewardship plan to include the property.
All right, and once again, Lisa Combrink, our CPF program manager, please introduce us.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The property is located at 14 Brushy Neck Lane in West Hampton, identified as Suffolk County Tax Map number 900-369-259.1. You can see it outlined in your aerial in yellow. The property is 1.68 acres. It's located in the R40 zoning district. This is on Brushy Neck Creek, and it is across from other town-owned land on the other side of the creek, 2 parcels, and then also another piece owned by the Peconic Land Trust totaling about 6 acres on the preserved pieces across the creek. This is part of an old duck farm. It's been identified as a possible property for a wetlands restoration project if we acquire it. The purchase price is $600,000. And I believe that there may be someone who wanted to speak also on the property.
Is this a developable parcel, Lisa?
Yes, it is.
And what's the yield? It's one house, right?
One house, correct. Yep.
And are there any structures on it currently?
No, there are not.
Okay, and that waterway, is that an artificial cut into that? It looks like there's a couple of those, the property next door, but is that a natural formation?
I'm not sure if it's a natural formation. It may be part of the old duck farm operation.
Yeah.
That's actually the Spionk River tributary, so it's fed by a natural spring up north of the of Old Country Road.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, any questions from board members to our CPF program manager? All right, Lisa, you said there was somebody who wanted to be heard that you knew of?
I think so, yes.
All right,
Yes.
let's try to
This is
identify
Kim Cordy. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here with Peconic Land Trust to speak in support of this acquisition located at 14 Brushy Neck Lane in West Hampton. To echo some of what Lisa's already shared, that this parcel sits on approximately 1.7 acres directly on Brushy Neck Canal, and it's within the town's wetlands target area across from already protected town and Peconic Land Trust parcels. It is in an undisturbed condition. It boasts a rich wildlife habitat with scenic views. And the acquisition of this parcel would add to the assemblage of the already protected parcels along the creek. It would protect the rich intertidal marsh habitat, contribute to the health of the Mauritius Bay estuary, contribute to climate change mitigation in buffering the mainland from sea level rise and storm surges. And it would be consistent with the town's comprehensive plan, which has determined that these natural scenic qualities of open land are important to the town of Southampton and should be protected. So I ask you to please support this acquisition to preserve this valuable natural resource.
Okay, thank you, Kim. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to be heard at this public hearing, specific to this parcel, this land of DePuro and Dederick in West Hampton? Is there anyone else? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion to close the public hearing, but leave the record open for written comments for 2 weeks.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So Sunday, you got that. So that's closed as well, except for written comments for 2 weeks. And we'll move on to public hearing number 5. Sunday, would you read the notice?
Public hearing number 5 to amend the conservation easement of the Madu Conservancy.
Okay. Lisa, will you be introducing this as well?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. We do have some photographs that I wanted to share with you as part of the presentation. This public hearing concerns the Madu Conservancy, which is located at 618 Sagaponack Main Street in Sagaponack, Suffolk County Tax Map number 9085110. Just wanted to give you a little background before we go through the photographs. The town board authorized the purchase of a historic preservation and conservation easement in August of 2015. So that was not that long ago, for a purchase price of $600,000. The easement was completed and recorded in January of 2016. And so the purpose of that easement was to preserve the architectural, historic, and cultural significance of the Madu Conservancy. And it's a really lovely property, very special gardens, and it contains some buildings that were identified in the easement document and in the background that was done as part of the acquisition. There were two structures, one known as the winter residence and one as the summer residence. Those are not the subject of the hearing today. And there was a third structure that was referenced in the easement that was called the bathroom and cottage structure. It's kind of familiarly known as the loo structure. So maybe we can pull up and just go through. Here's a kind of distant view of the building. The second one shows it again. It's surrounded by a lot of vegetation, as you can see. So there's a couple views of it. We can look at further views of it. It basically was two accessory structures from another property brought on to this property and then connected with with basically a connector. And you can see condition of it is poor. It doesn't have a foundation, and it's been in disrepair, serious disrepair for some time. As part of the consideration of what to do with this structure, we looked at a few things. Ed Wisnowski, who's chair of the Landmarks and Historic District Board, prepared basically a report, which he called notes, on this building in December of last year. William Hine, who is also on that board, prepared a memorandum in January of this year. And both of them looked at this loo structure to see how it fits into the overall use of the property and the historical significance of the property. I think Ed is here and he may speak to this a little bit further. But essentially, we confirmed that this building was brought onto the property in about 1975. So it's not original. Two separate structures put together to make one. The conclusion, in essence, is that this structure was incorrectly included in the easement document, that it does not have any particular architectural or historic significance. Just giving you that background because the owner, the Madu Conservancy, came in and asked for permission to demolish this structure and to essentially rebuild it in the same size, to surround it with landscaping so that it would, of course, be in keeping with the overall tone of the property. The easement prohibits anything from being torn down on the property if it's referenced as a contributing structure in the easement, which this was. So the only way that we can address that is for you to consider amending the easement to take the loo structure out as a contributing structure based on the reports and background that have been provided. The Madu Conservancy applied to the Landmarks Board for permission to demolish the building. They were granted a certificate of appropriateness to do that, of course, subject to this board's review of an amendment to the easement, which I understand is unusual, but I think under these circumstances, it was worth considering. And they would rebuild this. They've prepared plans for that. And they have agreed that if the easement is amended, that any changes to this building would have to go back to the Landmarks Board for consideration under the guidelines that are appropriate for review by that board. So that's the background on it, and I think there are others who would like to speak and add.
Lisa, before we go to anyone else, let me just ask a question, actually maybe two questions.
Yes.
To you. So are they proposing to basically demolish it completely and then rebuild it as it was? It's still going to look the same at the end of this?
I think there is someone from the Conservancy who could address that specifically in terms
So
of what the plans provide.
So the other sort of related question, when we, at one point, before I was here, I guess 2015, I think you said, purchased this easement, this historic easement, and provided them with some $600,000. In determining the value of that easement, was this structure part of that valuation? So in other words, we paid for this structure, which we might have an issue with then unless we're reimbursed for the amount that was attributed to this structure.
Understood, and that's a really good question, of course. And I reviewed the appraisal that was prepared, and this structure was not mentioned at all in the appraisal. The only two structures that were mentioned were the two that are referred to as the winter residence and the summer residence. So the
Okay,
value of the easement was based on those two buildings.
So there was no specific value attributed to this structure.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So then that should get us past that issue, and then, I just need to find out whether they're looking to tear it down and replace it, because sometimes you just really can't save these buildings; they're beyond saving, and this one looks like it may be in that in that status where you really just have to just get rid of it and build something that looks like what it looked like. Even some of our restorations, by the time we're done, there's very little left of the original building, because of all the, the dry rot and the termite damage and everything else, and structural concerns. So, all right, before we go to any of the other speakers, do any other board members have questions about this?
I just wanted to make the one point that the review of the landmarks board showed no objection. I think largely for the reasons that you stated, Supervisor, that the condition of the building was almost not salvageable. They will be part of the review to whatever building is put there in replacement if the board grants the amendment to the conservation easement to do so, that it's in keeping with the style that was originally there.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, and I saw Alejandro is here too from Madus, and Ed Wisnowski is here from the Landmarks Committee. So I guess I would take those two first, and then anyone else who wants to speak. So it's up to you guys. Who would like to speak on behalf of this?
Good afternoon, Supervisor. Just to indicate that the Landmarks Board has reviewed the proposed structure for replacement. It is essentially in the same style and size so that it will not disturb the proportions of the garden, which is the important component here. It will be a building that will be put on a concrete slab, compared to the existing structure, which rests on the ground and was the cause of the rot that helped deteriorate the building. And the Landmarks Board also set some conditions that there be minimal disturbance of the topography of the gardens with the installation of underground electric and water to the building that they are proposing. I believe also that the function of the building will be a little bit different in the sense that it's hoped to put a study area in the new structure, as well as a handicapped bathroom. And these were all important kind of features that the Landmarks Board thought were useful for the replacement structure. And Alejandro, if you want to speak up to this.
Before we go to Alejandro, do we have questions for Ed? So that was very helpful, Ed. I mean, it does demonstrate that what they're going to do with the building will enhance the usage of the museum botanical garden facility. So I think that was an important point. Thank you for that. All right, any questions for Ed? All right, Alejandro, did you want to speak on this? If so, you'll have to.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Alejandro.
Hi, I'm Alejandro Saralecki, the director of the Madu Conservancy. Thank you very much, Supervisor Schneiderman, for having us here today. It's such as it is. And I also wanted to thank Ed Wisnowski for a great historic report on the building. I learned a lot about it that I didn't know beforehand. As Ed mentioned, we are planning to use this as a welcome center for our visitors, which we don't really have at the moment. It was the loo shed, and it wasn't terribly accessible. So the new plan drawn up by Kitty McCoy has an ADA accessible bathroom. It's actually two bathrooms, one of which is ADA accessible, and it will be in the same like and kind, I think is the term that Kitty always uses, materials and such for the building. We also plan on saving as much of the plant material as possible, which we've done before. When we did our restoration of the building that I'm in right now, we basically dug up quite a number of trees, put them in storage for about 9 months, and replanted them to make it as seamless as possible. I think what's great about this is we'll get a new purpose. We can hopefully allow more people with disabilities to come and visit Madu. Right now, the public bathroom is one flight downstairs, and there's not an elevator to it. So there's a plus there. The study room is that little connector space, and that has the idea is to have books and information and graphics on the wall that describe the area, the history of Madu. And if somebody wants to sit down and learn about a plant or a tree or something that they've seen at Madu or Robert Dash's artwork, we'll have reference materials there. Also, you can't really tell, but one of the cool things about the building is that it has these mirrors, which probably frankly came from the 5 and 10. We're going to be on the outside of it in that connector piece. We'll be saving those and reattaching them to the building. So it really, as the building ages, it'll fit right in, is what we're hoping. And thank you all very much for hearing us out, and hopefully this will go well for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you.
Any questions for Alejandro? Okay, let's continue on. If there's any other people who are present at this meeting who wish to be heard, you can unmute your phone and we will recognize you. This is specific to this modification of the easement at the Madu Conservancy. Okay, seeing none.
Supervisor?
Yes, Mr. Wisnowski.
I'd just like to credit and thank Lisa for doing a lot of the point work and coordination and getting all the pieces together for this particular proposal.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks.
Thank you for mentioning that. And what we're going to have to do, because we've been doing this routinely with these Zoom meetings, because we feel it is a little more challenging for the public to participate. We've been leaving the record open for 2 weeks for written comment. I'm going to propose we do that once again, which does delay the time for which I'll be able to, sign this, but it does allow that if there is a concern, people will have the ability to share those concerns. So what I'd like to do is make a motion then to close the public hearing, but leave the record open for 2 weeks for written comment.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Are we up to 5 or 6?
6.
6. Oh, the last. Okay. Cindy, would you read the 6th public hearing notice?
Public hearing number 6, to consider accepting a grant of open space in connection with the subdivision map of Edwards Middle Line Highway.
All right. Is Kathleen, are you introducing this one?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Good afternoon, members of the town board. For your consideration is the acceptance of open space parcels in connection with the cluster subdivision plan of Edwards Middle Line Highway. The map is located in the CR 200 zoning district, is located in the hamlet of Noyak, and is further identified on the Suffolk County tax map as 934-1, lots 19.1 and 20.2. The final application consists of a cluster plan with 3 lots on approximately 15 acres. The planning board has granted final conditional approval for this map, which shows lot 1 having an area of about 1.61 acres, lot 2 having an area of approximately 1.89 acres, lot 3 having an area of approximately 1.8 acres, and the areas of dedicated open space, which are highlighted in yellow, totaling approximately 10.3 acres. That open space makes up approximately 66.1% of the total project area. Does the board have any questions? I do know that the applicant's counsel is on. I'm not sure if he would like to be heard, but he's also on this meeting.
Kathleen, oh, I see it says to be abandoned, but there's some kind of trail or access or pathway that's going through a portion of the open space?
That is a driveway.
That's a driveway. There's a trail easement that has the connectivity from the northern portion of the open space to the southern portion of the open space. So that trail easement is the town's access to maintain that connectivity, but the driveway will maintain will be in the ownership of the property owners.
So the driveway won't be on the open space portion, you're saying?
It's not on the open space, but I highlighted that trail easement just to show the connectivity from the northern portion of the open space to the southern, if that makes sense.
Just point that out maybe with the...
Tara's right on it. That's that trail easement right there.
Okay, that goes through the open space, but the thing that says to be abandoned right below it?
I apologize, I'm not sure.
Oh, it's a driveway. It says driveway to be abandoned. That's would be going through some of the open space. It's a kind of curvy.
Oh,
driveway.
correct. I apologize. Yes, that will not remain. That will be abandoned. I apologize, Mr. Supervisor. Yes.
No worries. You no need to apologize. Okay, so that and I take it that's been cleared, so that'll be just revert back to its natural state.
Correct.
Yeah, there you go. That section in there, and the other section of it as it wraps around. Excellent. Okay, there are some advantages to Zoom meetings, I suppose. All right, thank you for that. All right, questions and then this obviously was recommended by the planning board as
correct.
The correct configuration of the open space.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Kathleen? And it will be, I'm sorry, it'll be dedicated, it'll become town owned, is that?
Correct.
Okay. Property, all right. Any other questions? And then how was this gets managed the way all the other properties are managed, right?
Yes, and it's encumbered by, the town has recording documents to encumber it.
Right, we have a lot of other open space in this area, though, it looks like. Okay. Right, is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard just on this public hearing, the 6th public hearing? All right, hearing none, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and leave the record open for 2 weeks for written comment.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
I don't. Where's Julie?
There was some message. I think she got dropped off.
I'm not
She's
seeing.
having internet problems.
All right, but in terms of
Oh
recording
my.
her vote, I'm gonna have to make it the 4 votes that I state. So Sunday, just Scavone, Martel, and Bouvier and myself, and until Julie gets back on, I'm not going to assume how she would vote. So, all right, but we are closing the hearing and leaving the record open for 2 weeks.
I just got a text. She's calling back in. So if you want to wait, move forward.
You're holding it anyway. You're holding it for 2 weeks anyway.
We can,
Right.
yeah. I mean, if she wants to be recorded, we can always go back and reconsider the vote. Or just, I think we might be able to just add her name to it with her permission to the vote. All right, so that's the last of the public hearings. So next and more complicated will be public portion. And I know there was at least one speaker before who indicated that they wanted to be heard. So let me go to you, Sunday, first, and you're muted. You'll have to go off mute. Is there anyone who indicated they would like to be heard in public portion?
No.
Okay. All right, Charles, good luck with this. I guess what I know there was one person who spoke earlier. Maybe we'll take her first. Go ahead, identify yourself, please.
Tiffany Gavin.
Hi, Tiffany. All right, you are up. This is public portion. You have 3 minutes to make your comments known to the town board.
Thank you, sir. I'm here today as a follow-up to the May 12th, 20 Zoom meeting where I brought to the attention of the participants the active landslide occurring from 65 Cliff Drive in Sag Harbor. My neighbors and I were left with confidence that the many negative impacts from this man-made avoidable landslide were understood and the town would seek remediation by dredging the mouth, the canal, and seek land containment. My neighbors and I would like your continued reassurance that this man-made avoidable landslide remediation will continue to be fairly and equitably handled, as it appears that the matter keeps going back to chief environmental analyst for the town of Southampton, the person who has claimed responsibility for the planning and overseeing of the removal of the bulkhead on an elevated property at the mouth of a 20-foot narrow navigable tidal canal without any land containment set in place. It's caused impediment to navigation at high and low tide, blocked tidal waters. At low tide, water flowing into the canal has stopped. There's stagnant water for many hours a day, dead fish, dead snails, and now the odor is coming with the hot weather. It is now meeting the opposing shoreline and abutting properties. His responses to our concerns over the months and the many contradictions to the trustee codes and DEC procedures and guidelines lead us to seek your reassurance once again. We would like to continue to feel confident in the town that the environmental analyst is not the only voice speaking and providing evidence to the DEC and other agencies regarding this matter, as the current conditions differ from his plan and his observations and his predictions. This was a navigable tidal canal and has been for 70+ years, and it should not have been allowed to be altered.
All right.
We trust that you will continue to seek remediation as the residents have been severely negatively impacted by this decision.
So thank you, Tiffany. And I do recall looking at aerials of this at the last meeting. And was somebody tasked with looking into this?
Yeah, I
Yes.
took it up, and I spoke to Marty, as well as I've gone down to the site several times on different angles and different tide during different tide cycles as well. And there are permitted actions down there, and I asked our legal department, Jim Burke's folks, to put together a response to the neighbors and to the owners as to what happened down there. I mean, the permitted action that occurred with the bulkhead, and that letter was sent to Ms. Gavin, as well as the owner, and to some of the town boards, and of course we we could supply it to everyone else, so you know what the sequence of events with this area.
So
Was
what's
there-
the solution?
Well, we're still, maybe I could jump in also, we're still, as was indicated in our correspondence, the DEC, while they had a brief conversations about it, they're looking into it separately. They're the ones who would control any dredging permits. We were waiting for the individual from DEC to complete his review. So that's something that's happening.
But Mr. Andrew Walker is telling me he's only dealing with Marty Shea. So if Marty Shea's voice is the only voice that's speaking to a remediation of something that he doesn't feel he's done anything wrong, there seems to be a conflict of interest to the residents.
Tiffany, could you just
under the DEC?
Tiffany,
Sorry?
could you just allow me and the town board members the courtesy of
Sure.
letting the town attorney finish his comments, and we may have questions as well, and then we can come back to you. I'm sorry, Jim.
Right, no, just exactly right. Mr. Walker is the individual from the DEC that's reviewing this at this time. Both myself and Kelly Doyle in my office have been reached out to Mr. Walker. And he said that he will be giving us a report or a determination from DEC on this issue. And just have not received that since the last meeting that we talked about this on. So we're waiting at this time for DEC to act.
Do we know, and maybe this is for Councilman Scavone, you know, if the bulkhead were removed, and which caused, I guess, the land then to collapse inward, I mean, I would imagine that as part of the bulkhead removal, there was some sort of shoreline stabilization plan. I know sometimes they use like
bulkhead was determined to be a non-functional bulkhead, and I reviewed the aerial photos over a historic period of time, and this is not exactly a new occurrence, and I really leave it to our chief environmental analyst to make those determinations, as well as our legal department as well.
Right, and there's also, as Councilman mentions, there's also some additional cleanup at the site to be done as of yet. I mean, I was reached out to Mr. Shea last week, and he's been speaking with the landowner. They understand that there's, as part of the bulkhead removal, there was additional material that was holding up the bulkhead and maybe causing part of the obstruction of the property too. And that needs to be cleaned up, and that will be cleaned up. So that may assist.
Yeah, I mean, if the shoreline were planted, the roots would help retain a lot of the soils in that location.
Right.
May I speak?
And you know, sometimes they use those coconut husk type of mats to help retain the bank of you know, an active waterway. Tiffany, yes, sure, go ahead.
So according to the Town of Southampton codes and procedures of the DEC, the following have been ignored. A waterway cannot be altered. If a do-nothing approach is implemented, you need to, if a do-nothing, not install another land containment measure bulkhead is considered, it must be proven by different agencies and an engineer that no negative impact would happen to the water flow in surrounding areas. Navigation cannot be impeded. Recreation cannot be threatened. I'll move forward. Soil cannot allow to fall into the water. Tidal water changes cannot be altered. Under the DEC procedures and background, under procedures, repair, replacement, modification, or expansion would be actions that would have been implemented and considered if large amounts of fill were being washed from behind an existing bulkhead. Why would this bulkhead be allowed to be completely removed, allowing 100% of fill to fall into the water at the mouth of a tidal canal?
Are you sure? Tiffany, has all the sediment come from this property and not from the property across the waterway? It looks, just looking at the area, it looks like a lot of it has come from the other property, not from this.
Well, the opposing shoreline, what has resulted in this landslide, the landslide, which you have your arrow onto, is now meeting the opposing water side. And that has completely blocked off the mouth of the canal. This landslide is so big, it's about 14 feet wide into a canal, 13 inches high, and 200 feet in length into the abutting properties. It has been here for so long, the sand is running in and out when it was allowed to accept a tidal change at high and low tide, that the sand has now went higher on the abutting shoreline and has created this huge, massive shoreline of sand. That shoreline that you're referring to was underwater at one point. Now, because of the raise in the sea floor, it's now higher, and the landslide is even higher still. This was the channel. This area was the only width that was navigable by motorboat, and now it's no longer, because the depth has been completely raised by this landslide, and it's running in and out. The end of the canal is completely filled at low tide. It's dry in areas. There are dead fish and dead snails that I'm seeing, and the odor that's now becoming with the hotter days is atrocious. This was all avoidable.
Was this ever dredged in the past?
We haven't found anything on public record, but we have a neighbor that contests who it was.
Was it dredged by the county or was it dredged by the trustees?
Again, I haven't been able to find any public record of it. The only thing I have is the word of a resident.
Probably trustees, because I don't know that it was considered. You're saying it was considered navigable, but there was no, it sounds like it wasn't really deep enough for much in terms of boats.
No, a very small motorboat for 70 plus years. You could go back in Google search, you could see my direct neighbor north of this problem had a motorboat. Mm-hmm. And through that canal on the right side along where that bulkhead was removed, that was the deepest portion of the canal. Now it's completely filled. You could walk on this landslide and not be in but a foot of water. Right. It projects out of the water at the highest, at high tide.
So Tiffany, your goal isn't necessarily to put the bulkhead back, but to just be able to have the water move from the cut into the larger water body, right?
Yes, sir. The bulkhead, there are different levels of land containment, as you said, that you could do. The stone armor walls, I think they're called. There was many ways to achieve a soft shoreline. Right. Removing a bulkhead without land containment on an elevated property is unconscionable. There was no way for this not to have occurred. The lack of planning allowed for this direct result into a small
I haven't seen the permit or the conditions that relate to it. I'm happy to talk to our senior environmental analyst. But Councilman Schivoni has been, in fact, talking to Mr. Shea. So
Mr. Shea's perspective is very narrow of reality. He feels he's reforming a beach that never was. This was contained property. We have proof of this going back that it was grass, soil, and sand contained upland since the 1950s. Mr. Shea's position, when I tasked him when remediation would be taken, he responded, why would he remediate it just so we can navigate it by boat and paddleboard? I don't really feel Mr. Shea's position is one sharing of remediating back to what this waterway was for the last 70 years. I think he's trying to recreate something of his own passion, and it's not right at the expense of the residents in this community.
Well, without having the benefit of hearing from Mr. Shea, I will reserve.
I could send you his emails.
No, I'm happy to speak with him, but I hold him in high regard. So, Councilman Schivoni?
Yeah, there were wetland permit applications that were publicly noticed down here. So, Ms. Gavin, I sympathize with your situation. I know that you put a bulkhead in on your property in the past couple of years, and so the water in front of your house may be a little bit deeper than at the end. But this was a permitted action, and it's difficult to remediate something that was done within, what we believe to be the laws of the town. Now, you can differ and, disagree with that, and there are other remedies for you, I believe. However, the bulkhead was non-functioning, and the historic photos that I've looked at indicate that this had been closing over a number of years. And I'm talking going back to the 70s.
Can you show me where the upland was in the canal? 'Cause at the 5/12 meeting, you yourself said that this was navigable. So I'm interested.
I said that I remember small boats in there as a kid.
And that's a true statement.
And I do remember small boats in there. So it probably was, you can get out a little bit easier than you can today.
You can today. Supervisor Schneiderman, may I ask you a direct question?
Sure.
Regardless of whether this was permitted or not permitted, clearly some negative impact has occurred with the lack of land containment. This cannot be not acknowledged. So are we going to not remediate it because an accident occurred? Is that how we're going to address it? How is this going?
No, we have to look into it.
First of all, obviously there's shoaling in there. And I'm not going to say yet which party is responsible for that shoaling. Often nature is responsible for shoaling. I think the answer here is to get this cut, to get this dredged. It doesn't seem like a major project to get it dredged so that you don't end up with a mosquito-infested water body in front of you because there's no tidal flushing there. So I think that we should all work together without disparaging any of the parties, including Mr. Shea, and let's see if we can come up with a plan. I think the trustees probably need to be involved here, but this to me is a minor dredging project, and we need all the parties sort of moving in the same direction with the DEC. So we'll probably have to remove that material and have it carted off somewhere, because I don't know that there's an appropriate site to deposit it. But that seems to me the direction we need to go. It has been a long-standing town policy to have natural shorelines, particularly in areas with low erosion. And this is one of those spots. So what Marty did was consistent. I haven't seen all the, any actually of the conditions of the permit, which may have required, that the land, be stabilized in some way with vegetation or materials contained within the property boundaries. So I can't say whether there's been any violation of a permit or whether Marty missed something here. But I think it's been the town's desire to see these things go to natural shorelines. So we need to fix it so that the water is flowing into that, that narrow neck of it. Otherwise, it's going to fill in completely over time, and you won't have waterfront property, and you'll probably have quite a bit of mosquitoes in that area. So I'm happy to work with you.
Thank you.
Get everybody on the same page, but that's my 2 cents here.
I respect that. I appreciate it, and that's what I was hoping to continue to hear your continued support as you had provided on the May 12th meeting.
Right. So we need to get with the trustees about removing the shoaling there. Do you agree, Tommy John?
I'd like to speak with them further. Yes, we should definitely all work together. When we use the words remediation and correcting situations, this was looked at by the town, and I do support the decisions of our employees and what they, the permits that have already been applied for and granted and inspected. And I also know that the neighbors here have been in contact with the trustees as well. So yes, we certainly can work together, and perhaps something can happen here. I'm fine with that, of course.
If we're going to dredge it, though, we need to stop future landslides, correct? Otherwise,
correct.
I think the word landslide, it may be overused here, and that's just my observation. The bulkhead, it was landward, and it was deemed to be non-functioning. And if you look at the the aerials. I mean, that's what it looks like. I'm not an engineer, nor am I an expert on this, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of soil coming from the eastern side. It looks like it's coming from the western side, but again, I defer judgment to our experts.
You know,
Well, I do have some photographs that could show you that there was an 8-inch soil step on May 4th. It was approximately 20 feet in length, 8 inches in height. And then on May 16th, it was no longer there, completely eroded into the water.
it seems to me, though, that opening this up would be in the interest of not only your property, but any of the properties that front on it. So including the
Yes,
one
sir.
that had the bulkhead removed. And,
Yes.
you know, Jim, I remember when we were talking about Honey Pot Pond, and there was a mechanism, a water quality improvement district or something like this. Kathleen had done a whole bunch of research on this, you know, because if this isn't trustee land, I'm going to have to figure out who's going to pay to maintain this over time. And it's not going to be very expensive to remove a little bit of sand here, but maybe it's something that can, you know, if all the property owners want to sort of work together on it, then the town possibly could then do the dredging and, you know, collect it back over time, you know, from some of the properties that front on it. It's a possible mechanism. You're aware of what I'm talking about?
Somewhat, yes. And the trustees have been involved. Ann Welker is very, very familiar with this property, and I've had some discussions with Ann.
Is it their jurisdiction?
I believe it is. I believe the Bay Bottom, the underwater lands are their jurisdiction here. I can follow up with Ann on it. I was actually planning to go out with Ann to see it, and we're waiting to hear back from DEC on this also. But, you know, and like, as Councilman Schiavone mentions, you know, Marty has some very strong feelings on this, and he is our coastal engineer. Like you, Mr. Supervisor, I have great respect for Mr. Shea's positions. You know, sometimes he has to look at a larger picture on some of these issues. And but you know, at the same time, if the property calls for some type of dredging that would assist the people in the area, that would, you know, something we certainly can look into, and we certainly can work with the DEC and the trustees on that.
Yeah,
First, may I also just add one other follow-up to the 512 meeting?
Can I just say that the channel, I could see where the channel was deepest.
Yeah.
It was right along that
Yes.
bulkhead. So it's
Correct.
possible that if it is cut again, maybe the channel needs to move a little bit further over, sort of midway between the two shorelines. But go ahead, Tiffany.
Oh, so I don't think I'm understanding you. You're saying to the opposite shoreline should be cut into a little.
Well, I'm saying it looks like where the water's flowing in this area is very close to the property that had the bulkhead. And I would think that the channel ought to be probably center between this natural shoreline now on the property that had the bulkhead and the other natural shoreline across the way. If it's going to maintain itself, probably should be somewhere in the middle, not so close to one property.
Oh, I understand what you're saying now. That seems logical. With regard to the length of time that this, I don't know what other word to use, but landslide has been in there. It has raised the entire sea floor throughout this canal. The last house north of this problem no longer has water at low tide. I'm almost out of water at low tide because it's sitting with sediment and things are just like getting clogged back there. So I would seek full remediation of the entire length of the canal because it has been very severely changed over a very short period of time.
I don't know what to tell you other than I'm happy to sit in on a meeting with Mr. Shea and Mr. Schiavone.
And
you know,
may I ask?
and maybe the trustees too. Tommy John, do you want to set something up and to follow up this? And I'm happy to participate. Maybe we can get Ms. Welker there and others.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We'll set something up.
I think
Can you,
Councilman Bouvier may want to be part of that too. I don't know how we're going to get all of us there though, so.
can you guys hear me? Does anyone hear me?
I hear somebody speaking, a
I hear
question,
you.
yes.
Tiffany, it's Van Brody.
Hey, Van Brody.
Yeah, I'm the neighbor on I'm at 61 Cliff. I'm right next door to the property we're discussing. So I'm behind you. I think what you're saying is sensible, and it makes sense to what I've seen over the last few years. And I think, Jay, I hope I don't pronounce your name wrong, Schneiderman?
You did. Schneiderman.
Okay.
I won't take it personally. I won't hold it against you. Go ahead.
I don't mean any disrespect, sir. And I appreciate your view to look into this, and you too, Mr. Schiavone. And I look forward to it happening because the sand is building up and up and up. And my son is telling me that he's starting to smell stuff. He's come from the city to stay out there during this pandemic, etc. And this is what I've been hearing. So I look forward to remediation of this stuff. And I saw the cascade of what happened when they took out the retaining wall. You call it a bulkhead. And I disagree with you. The bulkhead was quite sound. At some point, the previous owner had nailed plywood to the vertical planks, and the whalers and tiebacks were still in good shape. So it was not leaking into this area.
Can I ask you, since we have two of the property owners on this, what's being referred to as a canal on the meeting, if we were able to set up a program, and we were able to get a permit, let's say a 10-year maintenance permit, are the property owners willing to shoulder the burden? I don't think it would be very much of, the occasional clearing out of that, cut that allows the water to flow between these two bodies.
I would have to ask, but I'd like to know the numbers and such. But the maintenance thing is one thing, but we didn't create this issue.
I understand it, but if the town did nothing, it would eventually close off, right?
Yes.
Even with the bulkhead, even if we didn't remove the bulkhead, the chances are this is going to get closed off. That sand is going to eventually accumulate in this area, and this is what happens, unfortunately, or maybe this nature's course with a lot of these smaller ponds and wetlands. They go through a process of what's called eutrophication over time, and the plant matter builds up in the bottom sediments, and eventually there's no more water left, and little ponds disappear over time. They become bogs, and then just solid land masses. So it's just something I want to put on the table, that there might be some costs associated with, keeping water flowing into this one spot. I don't expect it to be much, and we could probably calculate it. And it's something that potentially could be, put into a property tax bill that could just cover the cost of it over time. I'm not saying we would go that route, but I just wanted to take your temperature as to whether that might be a solution that you consider.
I would 100% consider it. I understand your position of how you just explained it. It makes total sense. Again, we're not asking for more than what we had. We're just asking to get back the navigable space. And we are very appreciative that you put that out there as an offer, because it makes very good sense for the next 10 years to allow us the opportunity to revisit it in 10 years, should we have another issue. It's setting a precedent of maintaining a waterway.
I'd like to know that as well, sir.
We had this conversation with Honey Pot Pond there too. So Kathleen did a whole bunch of research on this, and
Okay.
there may be a mechanism to do that. It's
No, I certainly think there is, but I can touch base with Kathleen. Sure, I think she's off to hearing that.
So it would be all right for Tiffany and I to go out tomorrow morning with our shovels and start digging.
well, if I knew where you could put it, and if the DEC said you can do it, I don't think it's it does not look to be a large volume of material there.
It's not, sir. It's what is it, 75 feet long, maybe, or less.
It's 115 feet long, 20 feet deep, 13 inches high above the shore.
You're just trying to cut a place for water to move through. So,
and the length of the canal to I don't know if it's get the floor bed back to where it once was.
All right.
So it's that channel that you had mentioned earlier, get enough that we can navigate back with a small water motorboat that we've had the opportunity to do that for 70 plus years and move this water in and out so it doesn't become
right. I need to better understand what Marty Shea was, his understanding of the environment here. Mm-hmm. And the DEC obviously would have to permit the sand to be removed there. So it would have to be some beneficial environmental reason.
Could I ask Tara, before we leave this issue, and since we're discussing this in this manner, Tara, would you go back to the historical photo of 1994, right where what we're looking at, and just take a look at that.
Look at here.
Or 2001. Let's go even just to, let's look at 2001.
Looks completely closed off in this one.
I mean, I've looked at this. This wasn't navigable with a small motorboat for quite some time, and I just want to say that now. I know you made your point, and we'll certainly look into this. But before we leave this meeting and we say this, I want you to know what at least I looked at when I went down there several times, and I looked at the historical photos. So
okay,
I just wanted to make sure that got in this meeting as well.
Okay, I'd like to also add to your response that the previous homeowner had a motorboat that was registered to, I'm assuming, the town of Southampton, because they had it moored while Hurricane Sandy was happening. So maybe you could just pull it. I could provide their
I'm not doubting anybody owned a motorboat or could pull it in and out of there. I just wanted us on this meeting to see that photo before we left.
Tara, can I see an older aerial here? That's not going to probably have the resolution back in the 30s.
Yeah, try 1976. That's a pretty good one. You can see something there where you could.
Yeah, you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a lot of shoaling in that area.
It only gets through.
But you can see that, but there's land containment. That little bit of shoaling was under. Now it's raised. That's the issue. So that shoaling, if that's the proper wording, that was below the water line. And there was enough water to allow navigation. Now what happened is this landslide has gone and sits on top of what was once buried underwater, because there's so much of that upland that came onto this shoal. I'm now learning what that is. I'm not disputing that any of this was existing. I'm just saying that this landslide has now raised the sea floor and it projects above the water line.
Yeah, I can't say that based on the arrow that it's not pushing in from the other side. It looks to me like that, based on the property line there, quite a bit is coming from the other side.
Well, that was always underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was there. I'm not disputing the other side. It's just the upland that came into the canal that I'm disputing.
I see these things. I've seen a lot of these in my tenure. they're typically, areas that are navigable inlets like this, or, the sand shifts and they sometimes get closed off. And then they're usually dredged unless there's a conscious decision to allow one to close off. And it might be part of Marty's thinking is to let it close off. I don't know until we bring Marty into the conversation and the DEC into the conversation.
And that disturbs me till no end. Is Marty Shea is allowed to close off a canal?
I don't know what his thinking is until I've spoken with him. I don't know what the benefit would be, but obviously if it closed off, then you no longer would have access from your property by water to the larger waterway. And I need to understand, why we would allow that to happen if that's what is happening here. But I don't know if it's has anything to do so much with the property where the bulkhead was as much as the property on the other side, which seems to be the main contributory to the infill in that area, at least from this area that we're looking at.
Sir,
Why don't we reserve judgment until we've had this meeting with Marty Shea, and Jim, we can have a meeting with Kathleen and see if, if there's no issue with dredging this out, then it's just a question of figuring out how to pay for it.
Right, we have to touch base with DEC to see what their input is on this, and obviously the trustees as well.
gentlemen,
And we've been waiting for that. So, we're kind of at a impasse here because we need to get information before we can move it.
Right, and we were originally weren't going to try. We were looking to hold off any kind of response until we heard back from DEC, but then we thought at least give Ms. Gavin and the neighbors there, an update, and then with the idea that hopefully that DEC will weigh in, shortly.
gentlemen, let me just say one thing. Until recently, until they took the bulkhead down, the image looked pretty much like this compared to the image that you recently took. There was always a little trickle, a little water going in and out, and you did not see sand going across. When the bulkhead was removed, there was a landslide, or for whatever better word, a sand slide. And as far as I could tell, the contributing closure was not the property on the left, but from the property on the right when they took the bulkhead down.
That could be.
On top of that, excuse me?
No, that makes sense that there would have been some additional material from that side.
A lot, really an incredible amount. I'm very surprised by it. I used to be able to, when you meet me, you'll see that I walk with difficulty. I have a cane, a loft strand crutch that I use. And I used to be able to walk to my property, having my hand on the bulkhead, which was approximately, depending on where I was, somewhere between waist height and armpit height. And it was very comfortable for me. So there, see, this image shows basically what happened.
Can I speak? I don't know if I'm being heard.
I hear you. I hear somebody speaking. Yes.
Yeah, so
Letting me to speak, guys. I appreciate it.
yeah, all right. I just want to weigh in, and that I've.
Who was speaking?
My name is Joe Velarde. I'm from Cliff Drive, also. I'm from 53 Cliff Drive. Tiffany is my wife. But for years, that the deep part of that channel was right along that bulkhead, and I would go out with my neighbor at 55 Cliff, who had a boat docked it in front of the house. We'd go out water skiing or fishing, and we had to hug that bulkhead to get in and out, even in low tide. In high tide, it didn't matter so much. But that was the channel. That was the deep water. I understand that there was a little shoaling, maybe a little bit of sand was not possibly collecting there over the years, but there was so much water there that wasn't an issue. The issue is now that since that months or weeks after that bulkhead was pulled, we noticed it, and it's growing daily, and it's clear sand, which was exactly what was up on that property being held by that bulkhead. It's very obvious what happened, And at high tide, there's about 3 inches of water there now, where it used to be 4 feet. It's a lot has slid into that area, and I don't blame Marty 100%. I think I know he has an intention to bring natural source shorelines back, but that I don't know what the idea was of how you could think that just pulling out a bulkhead when holding back sand. What's going to keep the sand there? That bulkhead, I used to paddle past it. The bulkhead was over my head. It was just clean. It wasn't even grass there. It was just sand. Nothing grew because it was sand. So you pull this wood out, even if a little bit of sand was leaking out, where is all the sand going to go? What's going to hold it in place? It needed to be excavated back, some stones put in, rocks, or very heavily vegetated. We've already spoken to the homeowner. She said she was supposed to vegetate it. There was a couple plugs put in, she told us. So the vegetation never really happened properly. I don't see how that would have worked anyway. It was 3 feet of sand or 4 feet of sand. So I think, maybe dredging it is the answer. Maybe once that's out of there, it'll stay out. The other side was always a shoal there. At low tide, it always became exposed. That's not the problem. It's the side along the bulkhead. And I think all the neighbors have seen this over the years and would agree with me.
Well, thank you, sir. All right, so we're still in public portion.
Hi, can I just say something? I'm Vito Saladino from 55 Cliff Drive.
Have you spoken already yet?
No, I have not.
Okay, that's why we're having public portion, so I'll recognize you next. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what to say much. I've only had the house there 4 years, and in 4 years, the water was fine. The past couple of months, I've been going out there, 6 months maybe. The water is totally different than what it was from when I purchased my house 4 years ago. And I come out there as a therapeutic thing for me with water in front of my house and everything. And every week it's like less and less now, which, some dredging there at the end and some reinforcement of that property, like Tiffany and the other gentleman was saying, is probably what's needed. So, it takes time to take care of all this. So just want to make sure that the town is up on it and, following Tiffany's recommendation, because she knows what she's talking about this. I really don't know what else to say about that, but
would you be
drying up?
Good advocate.
Vito, if this is done as a cost share, would you guys be willing to contribute as well to removing the sand?
It wasn't our fault.
That I don't know about exactly yet. We still got to discuss it. We have to see what the town's input's going to be first, or what the trustees and the council people come out with first. Okay. And then we have to figure that out, which, as long as it's not a forever issue because of the land drying up, the water drying up. But the town and the town should look into it before we jump in and figure out what to do. I would assume, I don't know how the law works on stuff like this, but.
That kind of makes sense, being that this was not caused by any of the residents. If the initial dredging were to be funded by the trustees, and then the 10 years moving forward, the plan that you had put forth earlier would be divided amongst the residents as a maintenance, seems to be a reasonable solution to the result of what's occurring right now.
Okay, so we're still in public portion. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard on this or any other matter?
I don't see any.
Okay, and so just to finish on, this matter, it sounds like, Jim, we can meet with Kathleen and see if it's something that might be an appropriate thing to set up an ongoing system. John, I know, is involved here, and Tommy John is involved in terms of the trustees and the DEC. We need to hear from Marty Shea. Yeah. So, this doesn't have to happen here at the town board level. This is something that probably should be, happening in, smaller separate meetings. And if some point a plan is developed here, yes, it would then obviously, come to the town board level. So I would just ask, Councilman Scavone, if you want to set something up with Marty, I'd be happy to attend. So again, maybe a DEC rep. And so we can figure out what the best approach is. Certainly we've heard from, I think, 3 of the property owners on there that they're asking the town for help to restore the flow of water into this area. And you know, we can certainly look into see if there's something we can do to address or mitigate the situation. But I think that's the best way to approach it, is to meet separately with Mr. Shea and the DEC and figure out if there's a way forward here.
We'll speak to the home. I spoke with the homeowner who's very interested in holding back her property. You could speak with her further on that too. Her feeling. She didn't.
That's the homeowner that removed the bulkhead?
Correct. She was advised to remove the bulkhead, and she did not say that any land containment was part of her permit.
Okay, but would be interested in pulling some of that land that may have flowed from her property inward back onto her property?
That would be a question directly for her, sir. I'm not really sure, but when she was made aware of all of the upland that she lost on her property due to the removal of a bulkhead that she didn't want to remove in the first place, she had mentioned, she was very upset that what she had done to the water canal.
Uh-huh.
This didn't seem to, as she expressed to me, to be of any of her design or intention.
Right.
So I would feel confident how she's communicated to me that she would be part of the solution.
Right.
And she does agree with the dredging.
All right. So, all right, thank you. So I'm going to make a motion to close public portion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. So, all right, public portion is now closed, and we can move on to town board resolutions. All right, so I will start with resolution 521 of 2020. It's authorizing an agreement with LICAD for counseling services. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. This is Long Island Council on Alcohol and Drug Dependence. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved.
Town Board Resolution 522 of 2020 authorized the purchase of 2 Kenworth T370 from Gabrielli Truck Sales Limited using the Sourcewell contract.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
Town Board Resolution 523 of 2020 authorized the supervisor to sign a contract for a used wheel loader with All Island Equipment Corporation.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 524 of 2020 authorized the purchase from the New York State OGS contract with Dell.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 525 of 2020 amends the 2020 adopted budget for the Bridgehampton Parks District.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 526 of 2020 amends the 2020 adopted budget for E911.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 527 of 2020 authorized highway fund pay-as-you-go for purchase of equipment.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 528 of 2020, West Hampton War Memorial Ambulance Association Incorporated Service Award Program.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Town
Approved.
Board Resolution 529 of 2020 is the Water Quality Advisory Committee appointments.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, 530 of 2020, authorize the town attorney to retain outside counsel. Be Ready, Fishbein, Hatter, and Donovan LLP to represent the interests of the highway superintendent as it relates to St. Andrews Road.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. On the motion, maybe to Jim first. So, Jim, I completely disagree with the highway superintendent's position here. I've reviewed all the documents in connection with St. Andrews Road going back to the 1930s when the town board passed a resolution in support of the county's effort to create County Road 39, which was running straight through the Shinnecock Hills Golf Course, two of the fairways there, forcing the relocation of the golf course north. And a trade was made that the parallel road of St. Andrews, that section be traded for what is now County Road 39. The town board passed a resolution and required the highway superintendent at the time to file the certificate of abandonment. The road was constructed. The loop for St. Andrews, because it no longer reached Tuckahoe, was created to allow the St. Andrews to still go under the County Road 39 and now loop back to County Road 39. That was all built at that time. And, years later, many years later, now the highway superintendent believes somehow that a portion of that road still belongs to the town. I've asked you to review this in detail, and I know that you have studied this. You've talked with title companies. It sounds like there is absolutely no doubt in your mind that the town board's intention was consummated, that the deal happened, and the property is not ours anymore. It's fully property of Shinnecock Hills Golf Course, which we are now being asked to provide an attorney to challenge your opinion that this is not our property. And it's starting out with costing $12,000. Who knows what it will end up costing? But doesn't this also jeopardize the fundamental trade, good faith transaction that was made between a property owner and the town and county?
Sure. I mean, that is my concern. I think if you follow to the logical conclusion, it would impact the viability of County Route 39, obviously. And as you said, Mr. Supervisor, if there was any kind of vagaries of the resolutions, and of course it was resolutions that were written 90 years ago, but when I was able to look at it, at the maps that were provided, I met a number of times with the Suffolk County DPW folks, and they eventually were able to provide a map to me that really details, and I'm sure I know all the board members have seen it, very detailed as to what exactly the transaction took place. It even details to the square footage of what the club received in part of the swap with St. Andrews Road, east and west, and what the town and county got as far as CR 39. So I would agree. I don't think there's really any question here, but and I will say that
why do you feel, Jim, that we must provide counsel? If we think it's frivolous and potentially dangerous, why must we provide counsel to the highway superintendent?
Well, there's a number of case law. As the town attorney, if really our office is conflicted out, we have another department head who feels he wants to pursue this. There's been cases dealing with. There's a couple of cases that emanated from town of Huntington. One was a planning board, but there was other cases dealing with the highway department. We felt that in lieu of trying to fight, number one, the issue of whether he's entitled to an attorney, I felt in consulting with my staff members and other people, felt that we'd probably lose that battle. So we'd be spending money on that first fight. Let's get to the genesis of this, of the issue instead. That being said, I have reached out to Mr. B, Peter B, who myself and a number of people from my staff, both Christine Scalera and Kara Bach, we met with them. We heard what they had to say. It really didn't change my opinion at all. More recently, I reached out to Mr. B and to Alex, to our highway superintendent, to see if we could sit down again and just before we start any litigation, which Mr. B is very receptive about, and go over the issues again. I think there may be some confusion as to. I want to make sure that all parties understand if there is any point of litigation, where is the dispute, if there is a dispute. And so before we move forward on that, I've asked Mr. B and our highway superintendent, I believe they're receptive to sitting down again. So we'll talk and maybe litigation.
But he still wants the authorization to allow him independent counsel to challenge your opinion, which
That's
is
correct.
based in soundly in the facts. There is just no basis whatsoever that I see to any other position here, and I still think it's a waste of taxpayer money to do this. And I wish the highway superintendent would just look at the facts here. I'm sure any reasonable look at the facts would lead to the same conclusion. But if you're telling me that I have no choice basically other than to provide him counsel under the, I guess it's highway law.
It's highway law and just general public office law as far as our role.
When does that end? If somebody wants to just throw away taxpayer dollars, when can we say no? Yes, you're an independently elected position, but you need to come to us for funding. When do we get to say you have no basis here in law? There's no.
Yeah, I mean, it's would be a case by case situation. I understand. In this situation, the only real issue that could possibly exist is some ministerial act of maybe, as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Supervisor, that the highway superintendent was directed to file the abandonment. And if there was any issues about what was filed and what wasn't, why St. Andrews Road west of Tuckahoe, which is the road that bisects the course, that was off the Suffolk County tax maps, and St. Andrews Road east, for some reason, was never off the tax maps. I don't think that's an issue that really is pertinent to the underlying overall issues in this case, but that was one of them. So technically, there may be a minor, again, I think is more of a ministerial.
There was no abandonment filed for either portion of St. Andrews Road.
Right, that's my understanding. You're right. And I think to me, it's clear that, what all the parties were looking to do here, and that the transfer of the lands occurred as to what all the parties were looking to do, and obviously the road was built out exactly as to the maps that were provided to us by the county. So I would agree with you, and then as I said in speaking with Mr. B, he's willing to meet. He would like to just get retained for his time, which I understand, and I'm hoping that with another meeting or two, we can hopefully resolve this prior to any kind of litigation.
So Jim, I got two questions relative to that. Number one, what would be the harm if you're going to have this conversation, if the supervisor withdrew this or tabled this resolution till another time? And the second is what jeopardy is there? And maybe this is a discussion offline, but think about it. Jeopardy if the board decided to vote against this.
If you decided to vote against it, we'd be in litigation on this issue, and then of course that would be the choice of it'd be an issue of whether the highway superintendent would be entitled to have representation, not necessarily the facts of this case, but whether he would, if he feels there's a legitimate dispute where he disagrees with myself and my office, whether he'd be entitled to pursue an action on his own, and whether the town should fund that action. So we that would be the first step. I'm trying to kind of, in this situation, in my review of the case law, I think it's more likely than not that the courts in this situation would come down in favor of the highway superintendent on that particular issue. Just the fact because at this point he disagrees with the determinations of our office, and he may, in this situation, be entitled to his own representation. But that being said, as I said, we're looking to see if we can have further discussions and try to minimize any expenditures in the matter. As far as withdrawing or holding the resolution, you just have to understand that I understand that Mr. B, would like to see to be formally retained it's before putting any additional time in. But in my conversation with him, he's certainly looking to try to resolve it if we can. And with my office, myself, and others that have been involved in it, so I'm more than happy to sit down with the highway superintendent and Mr. B to try to resolve this as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Anyone else on this?
Just to be clear, Jim, at issue is a town board resolution agreeing to swap St. Andrews Road for County Road 39 when it was constructed, or when it was planning on being constructed back in the 1930s.
Yeah, so 1932.
1932.
Council person, right? And so the real question, I believe the highway superintendent, I would speak for him, but I believe he feels that he was advised by some folks that his position, I believe, is that the St. Andrews Road East was not part of the swap. I'm not quite sure. That's his position, and so
okay,
and that is still a town road.
So the map is very clear that was attached to the resolution that this area was to be abandoned and that loop created. If this wasn't going to be abandoned, you wouldn't need to build that loop because people could have driven right to Tuckahoe Road. Right,
I agree with you, and and to his, not to defend the highway superintendent, he can certainly defend himself, but the resolutions, the resolutions themselves, when you read it, and it can be a little confusing. It was 1932. It's not as clear as the way that we may be doing things now. It might having legal descriptions and maps attached to resolutions and whatnot. So it was a little vague. But then when the county, and it was a couple of times before I was actually the county was able to come up with the clearest map. But when they came up with that clearest map, which I provided to the board, at that point, it's really seems to be there's no question as to what was contemplated by the parties and what happened, quite frankly, and my underlying issue is that if somehow or another this whole agreement was to be untangled, you would have to, the club would have a claim back to CR 39, which of course, would be catastrophic. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to sit down. I think Peter B. I've dealt with Mr. B in the past. I think he's a reasonable person. I may be able to sit down with him and talk with Alex, and maybe I just want to be able to clarify the issue because I believe Mr. B and myself, I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he understands that I think he agrees that St. Andrews Road East was part of the contemplation of the resolutions in 1932. And maybe if I could sit down with Mr. B and with the highway superintendent, we can come to that conclusion. And if there's some other reason why they still think that the road should be is owned by the town, then I can hear. But so far in my conversations and my meetings with Mr. B, I haven't been convinced that there was any outside reason other than, from what I know, that St. Andrews Road East should not be included in the transfer of
It seems like the only mistake that was made back then was the highway superintendent was told to file the certificate of abandonment and didn't.
Right.
And certainly the town shouldn't now benefit by a mistake made by its own agent.
Right, right. And, it may have been that it looks like maybe, the work was proceeding from the west to the east. And maybe some of the work was done in a more proper fashion, from the west. And as work continued, maybe, like I said, the paperwork wasn't filed. I also did sit down with the head of state DOT right away, who was my former client when I was at the Attorney General's office, who I showed him the maps because the highway superintendent provided me with some state maps. And I sat down with him and I sat down with the resolutions and I asked him to review it. And I actually walked out of the meeting at the state office building in Hop, even with a clearer understanding of that clearly that the entirety of St. Andrews Road, both west and east, was clearly contemplated in the spot. So.
All right, so we had anyone else on this before I call the vote?
Well, I just want to say, Jim, I appreciate all the work you did on this. And if you're saying that we should provide some funds for the highway superintendent to have some legal counsel, then I will take your advice on that. But I certainly hope that, like you said, that you guys can talk about it and the facts as your office sees it comes out and the highway superintendent understands that and we can be done with this.
Yes, thank you, Councilperson Lofstad. I think it may ultimately be cheaper in the long run to authorize this, and so we're not fighting on the first issue of whether he should have his own private representation. That itself costs money. So I think we may be able to, in the long run, be cheaper for the town to go this route, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve it.
Thank you.
All right, and once again, I'm going to support this because Jim is saying that we need to provide counsel. I do think it's a frivolous pursuit. I think it's a dangerous one and a waste of taxpayer money. I want to put that on the record, but if I must provide our highway superintendent counsel so that he could engage in this folly, then so be it. I'll do that. All right, so let me call the vote. All in favor? Reluctantly.
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's move on to the next resolution that was adopted. 531, co-sponsored with Councilman Bouvier, waives building permit fees for the Bridgehampton Child Care and Recreation Center.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 532 of 2020 to accept a maintenance bond in connection with the site plan of Flying Point LLC 1 in Watermill.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved. 533 of 2020 is a senior accountant salary adjustment of $5,000. Senior accountant in the controller's office. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 534, notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of O'Sullivan and Eichenbaum, or O'Sullivan, I guess, hyphen Eichenbaum, Hampton Bays, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 535 of 2020, notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Yoon in Hampton Bays and amending the CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, 536 of 2020, authorized acquisition of lands of Schmidt in Bridgehampton, amending the CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Mr. Supervisor, excuse me, I think you were
Oh,
gonna
these-
hold
Yeah,
open.
these are the ones that we just heard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we
Thank
just wanted to
you.
make sure. Held over for 2 weeks, the next 4, I think.
You are very right. Thank you for jumping in there. We cannot vote on this one yet. The record is not closed. So I will make that a motion to table. I'll take the same second by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Aye.
And we're tabling it Sunday for 2 weeks. 537 of 2020, authorizing acquisition of lands of Ruby Associates in Hampton Bays and amend CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. I'll make again a motion to table. Who wants to second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Table for 2 weeks. 538, authorize acquisition of lands of DePiro Dederick, West Hampton, and amend CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. I'll make a motion to table for 2 weeks, seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 539 of 2020, authorize acquisition of lands of Zipper, Tuckahoe area, amend CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, so that's table 2. 540, 2020, authorize amendment to historic preservation conservation easement on the Madu Conservancy property located at 618 Sagaponack Main Street, Sagaponack Main Street, Sagaponack. Why do I feel like I keep saying the same thing? Related to a building known as the loose structure. I think there's something wrong with the title there. So I make a motion to table for 2 weeks.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That is tabled. All right. It looks like we're going to the walk-in packet. I'm just gonna find it.
Hey, we are tabling the first one, right? So we'll just,
No, we didn't walk it on the first one.
we didn't walk it on.
Yeah, it's withdrawn.
So that's
Okay.
that's not eligible. Yeah, so we're gonna start with yours, Tommy John.
ID number 34202 to amend a contract with Contemporary Computer Services Incorporated, CCSI, to upgrade Microsoft Active Directory services.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
ID number 34204, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 contract extension with Seneca Pavement Markings Incorporated to furnish and install pavement markings on various town roads.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Approved.
ID number
Oh, go ahead.
yes.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. You have one more. Yep.
Okay, ID number 34205, authorize the supervisor to execute a contract extension with Contemporary Computer Services Incorporated, CCSI, for managed network services.
Second.
Thank you.
You all seconded together. I'm gonna give it to Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, fifth one, 34209 is warrant number 11. And that also, what else? It includes Capital 11, CPF 11, and payroll liability.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. And the last one, authorized, this is 34210, authorization for the implementation of the reopening plan for the town of Southampton.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
Excuse me, Mr. Supervisor, before you wrap up the meeting, I just wanted to give Councilwoman Lofstad an opportunity to weigh in her vote on public hearing number 6. As your Zoom meeting cut out, but you participated in the hearing and we just didn't hear your vote.
Right, and we made a motion to basically close the hearing and leave the record open for 2 weeks for public comment. Are you okay?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And sorry for my technical difficulties.
It happened to me too, just right after.
It happened. You know, so hopefully the next town board meeting we'll have in person, and we won't have technical difficulties, hopefully, with that. All right, is there any other business? Now's your chance. Okay, seeing none, I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is it adjourn the meeting, close the meeting? Adjourn the meeting. That's the proper.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.